So we have another long one here. Assuming I dive following the RDP rules regarding repetitive dives, how long will it take in total from the start of the first dive to the end of the last dive to complete the following dives? We know that there's lots of possible tricks here. I'm going to draw out a 3-dive diagram, and I'm going to make sure I put my safety stop reminder in there, because of course I have to include any required safety stop in my addition of the total time required to go through this series of dives in a day. I also need to think to myself, deepest dive of the day first. Well, 60 foot is the deepest dive listed here, so I'm going to enter the 60 foot in for 55 minutes. And the next dives are identical depths and in fact identical times. So I've got 40 foot as my second dive for 40 minutes. I'm writing the times in a different color so that it's easy for me to identify and add them up with my calculator at the end of working it with the RDPML. So now I've got all of these numbers in. I might just do a quick double check to make sure that I am going from the deepest dive and getting progressively shallower, or at least not putting a dive that's deeper in after a shallow dive. So now I've done that, I can get out my ERDP-ML. And what am I going to do with it? Well, I've taught you that the best thing to do is start in surface interval mode. Nothing wrong with doing that, but if you're becoming a master of the RDP, which by now you probably are, you're probably already thinking to yourself, 60 foot for 55 minutes, that puts me in pressure group W. If I'm going to end the first dive in pressure group W, I know that I've got to do a minimum surface interval of at least 1 hour. And then as I look at the second dive, 40 foot for 40 minutes, that's a fairly shallow dive and not that long a dive. So a 1 hour surface interval is almost certainly going to allow me to do that second dive. So do I really need to use the minimum surface interval mode, given I already know that I'll end the first dive in pressure group W requiring a 1 hour surface interval? So I'm actually going to start in dive planning mode on this occasion. Dive planning, enter, multi-level, no, first dive, yes. The first dive is 60 feet for 55 minutes. Safety stop required. So I'm going to note down my required safety stop, and sure enough, pressure group W is my ending pressure group. So if you hadn't already thought to yourself, I'm going to end in pressure group W, you may have a minimum surface interval written down in that space. And now you're crossing it out, because when you click enter, you get the WXYZ rule, C rule 6, and it very kindly reminds you, don't forget to do a 60-minute surface interval as a bare minimum after this dive. So I'm now going to click enter, and I'm going to enter in that 1 hour minimum surface interval, which gives me a pressure group of I. So 60-minute surface interval, pressure group I. Before I continue on, what I'm going to do is, in order to avoid making a very silly mistake, I'm actually going to remember that the WXYZ rule requires a 60-minute surface interval after all subsequent dives. So let's put in the 60 minutes between dives 2 and 3 as well, because we basically already know that's what the surface interval is going to be. So then I can put my pressure group I in, and all I need to do is find out whether a required safety stop is in this second dive. So 40 feet for 40 minutes. At this moment, I would expect a safety stop alarm if one's required. There is no safety stop alarm, so I can put an X right there for my safety stop. And the ending pressure group at the end of dive 2 is pressure group S. So now I can click enter and do my 1 hour surface interval, which puts me in pressure group G. Finally, do I need to do a safety stop at the end of this third dive? Double check it, 40 foot for 40 minutes. I'm doubting it, and yep, there is no required safety stop, so I can X the third dive safety stop, put my ending pressure group, and now I can get out my calculator and add up the numbers. So 55 minutes was the time of my first dive. and I did have to do a 3-minute safety stop. 60 minutes was my surface interval following the WXYZ rule, and 40 foot was my second dive time. Following the WXYZ rule, I did another 60-minute surface interval, plus 40, plus 3 gives me 261. What did I do wrong there? I added in a final safety stop. I shouldn't have had that. It's minus 3. 258 is the correct answer for this one.